right, it's 12:01 and I'd like to welcome you to our weekly listening session. Thank you so much for coming and being on and doing the work that you're all doing. Um, I'm going to start sharing my screen. Um, We're all here for serving small business in today's challenging times. This is our fourth listening session. We hope that you all find these useful. It's a time for us to come together, share information that we have. We're excited today to have our friends from DC join us. We'll talk about that in a minute. Before, just want to let everybody know their audio is muted. So you know, just in case, I think we're going to start to be able to not say this anymore, but to find your cursor and your Zoom menu, drag your cursor down to the bottom of your screen. You'll see a mic icon on the left and a chat box on your right. It's got a bubble-ish, kind of squarish, bubble-ish icon looking thing like you'll see in cartoons that have the words in the cartoons. We are recording this webinar, this listening session. You're free to share it. We'll send all the registrants a link as soon as we can, probably by tomorrow. And if there are any slides, we'll make sure that you receive a copy of today's slides. And we also have a handout that I'll post a link to into the chat as soon as we get going and we're ready for the handout. But for now, before I do that, I'm going to stop sharing and let's see how many people we have on. I think we have a manageable amount of people on the call. So I am going to just have you say your name and your organization, and I'm going to call on you. If you could unmute yourself, please do. And we'll do that. Well, just your name and your organization and where you're located, so that we just get an idea of who's on the phone. I'm going to just start with the Cameo staff. We've got, I'll introduce them. And first, Expediency, we have Susan Brown, who joined us this week as a staff member. She's our new VP of training, and Melissa Cruz, who also joined us as of the end of last week, who is our Southern California program manager, and they just waved to you. Star, you want to introduce yourself, please?
Oh, yes. I'm Star Van Buren. I'm with the Small Business Development Center hosted by El Camino College. And our office is actually located in Hawthorne. The college is located in Torrance.
Great. I have a 703-330 number. Okay. And I think Carolina might be on the call, but she's probably on the phone multitasking. Ahmed, want to mute yourself, please? All right, moving on to Jane. Jane Allo. If you haven't found the mute button, it is, as I said, you take your cursor to the bottom of your Zoom screen.
Hi, my name is Ahmed, and I'm joining the video from San Jose.
Thanks, Ahmed. Daniel Morales. You should all be able to, if you're on your phone, *6. I don't know if that unmutes your phone. You should have a mute button on your phone. Zoom is a little different. Okay, Jerry Hernandez. Jerry. Luis Collis. Okay, let's try something different. If people are not able to, and I'm gonna are not able to unmute themselves, find the mute button. I'll say it once again. You take your cursor to the bottom of your screen. It's the microphone icon in the very left-hand corner. You'll see it lets you mute and unmute yourself. I am going to do this a different way because it seems like we have more people joining us. And I would like you guys to chat your name, your organization, and where you're located into the chat button, into the chat box.
There you go.
So we'll take, if you're all muted. I know we've got 30 people on the line, so I know that you're here. There we go. Thanks, Lizzie from Madison Services Group. She's on our advocacy team. We'll hear from her. Chuck Siffers, Hi Juan from the city of San Jose. Mary and Daub, who is our data guru in San Francisco. Tim Russell and Crystal Rasmussen from Ren Center. Robert from Economic Development Financing Corp from Mendocino. We've got a couple people from SBDC in El Camino College in the Hawthorne. Welcome. And from Sacramento. So we're all over the place. Watsonville, Amy from Watsonville. Luis working on the CBDG program. Excellent. Angel from Moreno Valley. And I won't have enough time to say all of your names, but really glad to see you all here on the webinar. We'll do it like that. Great. So today I just want to talk briefly about our trainings our past webinars can be seen at this web address. If I can get someone from the Cameo staff to type that into chat. If not, I can when I'm right after I introduce our guest speakers for today. We've had stuff on teaching online. We have stuff on the PPP program, the payroll protection program offered by the Treasury/SBA from the stimulus program. We have the SBA EIDL loan program. We've got some really good resources that we've been putting together, alternative capital. So please visit our training page. It has all of the webinars labeled as COVID if they've been in response to the COVID response. They're open to everyone. Also, just to let everybody know, these classes are kind of set at this point, but we have a CDFI Essentials class that we're starting on Friday for those organizations that are starting up their loan programs. So that's really exciting. We have a large cohort. It's a peer learning cohort of 9 organizations with multiple staff people. So we're really excited to have to start that this Friday. And Susan Brown, who is on the call that I introduced, she'll be leading that program. And we also have our second cohort of bringing TA online starting on Friday. Our first one is in their second week, and our second cohort, it starts on Friday. If by any chance you are interested in that class and would like a training, if we can put it together, I'm not sure we'll be able to do a third cohort, but if there's enough interest, please email me at hpickman at microbiz, sorry, not at microbiz, at Cameo Network, and I'm popping my email into chat right now, cameonetwork.org. You can find me there and let me know your interest. Just 2 things to put on your schedule, and we'll send around the registration links in a day or so. TA providers roundtable with state leaders is going to be on Monday at 4 p.m. And then on Thursday of next week, we'll have our third Thursday webinar back to our regular normal time, although nothing's regular right now. And we're going to talk about creating good jobs in crisis, kind of a look forward on how you might want to help your clients when they go back to work. So that is what we have coming up for next week. And of course, as things come up, we do put things on the schedule. So bear with us as we send our emails around. We know your emails are getting flooded, but we're trying our best to keep to not repeat information that you can find elsewhere, and to provide some resources that'll help you in this trying times. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Ann Sullivan and Elizabeth Sullivan from Madison Services Group. We are going to have a federal advocacy update from the two of them. So I am going to turn it over to Ann and Elizabeth. Are you?
Wonderful.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Heidi.
If we can go to the first slide.
Yeah, Heidi, I can't share my screen. It's disabled it. If you don't mind sharing the slides.
I gotcha. Has it
Thank
moved?
you.
Yep. Hello? We can't hear you though. Hello?
We're still there. I was just,
Okay.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you
Yeah.
now. Yep.
Okay. So we'll just start talking while the slides. So our first slide is what's going on in Washington, which is, you know, the 20 million or wait, $2.2 trillion question. Just know that it's shifting sands and plans change day to day. So the latest for us is that the Senate wants to pass additional funding for, especially, I mean, the impetus is the Paycheck Protection Act program. The Treasury asked for $250 billion more. The Democrats, the Speaker and Senator Schumer felt like the price tag should be more like $500 billion. Basically, everybody is worried about Paycheck Protection Program running out of money. Now, it's hard to believe that in a couple of days that's already happened, but it looks like there's just so much demand, much more demand than anybody could have kind of predicted. And so that's why, instead of waiting until April 20th, which is the date that the speaker had originally said she wanted to think about moving a next bill, the CARES 2 bill. Instead, it looks like now this is on a fast track. I don't know how extensive. There's not enough time to do a lot of other things. So there's three outstanding concerns that are driving the Senate bill, which, you know, they are going to try to move it even maybe this week, which is first and foremost, more money for the Small Business Loan Program. Second, enhancing unemployment for 2 more months or some date further. And then individual payments beyond the $1,200 that was given in the CARES Act, which was just passed. Looking for another round of payments to individual taxpayers to help assist. So those are kind of the three things that are driving this rush to the next bill. There was,
and
go ahead.
I was going to say, and we're not going to go into all the SBA programs. Cami has such fantastic, extensive information at that link that Heidi put up. But basically, the chair of the House Small Business Committee, Nydia Velasquez, sent a very detailed letter to both SBA and Treasury yesterday, requesting answers by tomorrow around implementation for the PPP. So we'll make sure you have access to that letter. It has a lot of really good questions that Ann has said if a small business could actually write to the Treasury and SBA, these are probably the questions that they would write. So just know that that's in the works.
And I actually felt like Cameo wrote the first part of it because
he says, what about, what about the micro loans and the underserved? And I mean, just kind of expressed exactly what we've talked about in our policy committees, exactly the worry that people will get left out, exactly the worry, what about the lending institutions that are not private banks, the other lenders? Are we making sure that they are prepared to deploy as well? So that's a really good letter from Nydia Velazquez, who's the chair of the Small Business Committee. And so look for some actions with respect to that as well. So I was very heartened to see that letter. Infrastructure, that was supposed to be in this bill. Things have moved way too fast. And the speaker abandoned the desire to have the infrastructure bill, which is $760 billion over 5 years, for all kinds of projects that we all really care about. But that will have to be at a later date, a fifth bill perhaps. And that's much more stimulus driven than relief driven in terms of getting people back to work rather than just making sure they're able to pay their bills. So that should be decided later. There was also creation of a House House Select Committee on the coronavirus crises, and that's going to be chaired by Representative Jim Clyburn, who's a very senior Democrat in the House from South Carolina. And that's going to conduct oversight over this massive amount of money that the government is spending. They'll have subpoena power, and the idea is really to make sure that fraud, waste, and abuse is, to the extent that it can be minimized, making sure that the taxpayers are getting their money's worth and that it's not being taken advantage of by bad actors. And then there's a lot of agency guidance that you'll want to continue to take a look at, and Cammie will be on top of this, but there's a lot of guidance from the IRS, from the SBA, from Treasury about, the lending, about a lot of other aspects of the CARES Act and those to follow. Let's go to the next slide.
So Heidi is going to send out a one-pager that goes into more detail around these new effective employer obligations, but we just wanted to bring them to your attention since they're effective April 1, 2020. So if you have under 500 employees, there's the 2 weeks of paid sick leave that goes into effect. That's capped at $511 per day and $5,110 total if the employee is sick, or 2/3 of their regular rate, or $200 per day, and $2,000 total if someone is caring for someone else who is sick. There's also an expansion of family leave, or FMLA. Employees can get up to 10 weeks of this at 2/3 of their regular rate. That cannot exceed $10,000 total for the full 10 weeks, but this is something that employees can take to feel assured that they can return to their position. As Anne referenced, there are 2 documents that have a lot of great information about these 2 changes. One is from DOL, which is an FAQ for employers and employees, and another one is from the IRS. And in order to pay for this, and the IRS, that's what this FAQ touches on, employers can get an 100% quarterly payroll tax credit to cover these expenses.
Next slide.
And anything to add, or should we go to the next slide?
No, let's go to the next slide. There's also in this massive last bill, I think it was 880 pages, there are a lot of tax changes and retirement changes. So I'm just going through 3 things. First of all, there's a refundable credit against the employer payroll for employers that are hurt by the coronavirus but retained employees. That, by the way, has been the subject of a lot of questions both on the lending side from businesses, which is, you know, well, what if the government didn't deploy the money fast enough and I had to lay employees off? Then I'll rehire them once I get the money, but for now, how do we calculate that? So there's, you know, kind of a lot of questions surrounding that. Retirement accounts, basically, you can withdraw up to $100,000 from your retirement accounts without penalty. There's usually a 10% penalty, and so this allows for retirement money to become your bridge individually, or actually a business could also, you know, you could use it that way if you wanted to. But basically, it makes sure that you can use that money without penalty. And then just the last changes, and we go into it further, I think in our one pager, but the health coverage changed, like what insurers have to cover. They've got to cover telehealth visits. They've got to cover tests. They've got to cover vaccines related to COVID-19. For health savings accounts, this is an important change. If you have a health savings account, you can now, under this law, use your health savings account for non-prescription medication. So any pain relievers, any over-the-counter medication, you didn't used to be able to buy that with your HSA card. You now can. So that's another big change and something that I think will help a lot of people. And, you know, I think we've pretty much run out our time, Heidi. I know we can spend hours on this, but hopefully have given you some information that's helpful.
Oh yeah, that's we can take some questions. I'd like to open it up for questions because that was, you know, nice and brief. We didn't want to sort of talk at you, but there's a lot of things in here. I'd like to go back. First, I might as well start on this thing on the retirement account. So what you're saying is that if I have an IRA and I need to use it for my rent, I could take it out of my IRA account without penalty. Is that what?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
Or, you know, I know that business owners have, you know, asked me many times over, like, is there any way that if I run into a problem with my business expenses or whatever I need to do, can I use my retirement funds for it? Well, the answer is always, well, yes, you can, but you're going to pay a penalty if
Right.
you're, you know, under a certain age. And so this allows retirement funds to be used however you need to use them without a penalty, up to $100,000.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
So I am going to go back to the first slide because there was a lot in there and see. I had a question about the select committee on the coronavirus and making sure it's not able to fraud. So how does that jive with the White House firing their watchdog, or how does? Yeah.
I know that the creation of this select committee has been, you know, touted as a partisan move, but it's actually patterned after a Truman committee that saved the government, you know, billions of dollars, I think. So there's precedent for it, and the goal of this committee is to be a watchdog over the spending because there's so much of it, right? There's just bound to be abuses. It's not meant to do anything else. It's not meant to sit and, you know, score political points against Trump or for Trump, whatever, you know, whatever the motivation is. It really is to make sure that the money is spent as wisely as possible. So I know the media has talked about the link and, oh, this is just going to be a way for the speaker to get at the president, or, you know, there's been, I've just seen a lot in the media about it, but the fact of the matter is this is a really good idea to watch over the taxpayers' dollars. Trump firing the IG, I don't have much to say about that. I mean, the president any president can hire or fire anybody they want to, right?
So they're different. That's my question, right? They were different.
They're very different.
Oversight
right.
methods. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. The one that Trump fired, they are primarily looking agency-wise, right? They're the watchdogs pretty much over the executive branch spending, but Congress their oversight, this committee encompasses oversight over everything.
Okay, that's definitely makes
Does that
more
make sense?
Yes, it makes more,
Yeah.
it makes sense. I think, Nancy, did you have a question? I muted you because, oops, she might have dropped off. I muted her because I heard noise in the background. I have that power. I know some of our members are interested in what's coming down the pike, and if you have heard anything about how it's going to come down the pike of the money from the SBA to the service providers. Do you know anything about that? That stuff that was passed?
You mean like the Women's Business Center
Yes.
grants, things like that?
Yes.
I believe that in the next week, those grant applications are ready for the additional funding that both the SBDCs and the WBCs received. At least that's what the SBA headquarters told them.
Okay, well, that's good to hear.
So that should be fairly shortly.
Okay. And that's also from a selfish point of view, from the money that's available for association-like type groups.
You mean for the technical assistance part of it?
Yeah.
I don't know what the timing is on that, but that was definitely, we talked about it, Heidi, we talked about it. There's in the law that in fact there's much more flexibility and funding for additional technical assistance, which is completely justified given the new programs are being rolled out. But I don't know that timing is the same as the WBC and SBDC.
Got it. Okay, that was just a selfish question. I'd like to open it up for everybody else to ask a few questions. I'm sure that there are going to be questions, so you can either unmute yourself, I don't know if you can raise your hand. I don't have a raise hand button on my thing because
I would also say that you don't need to ask questions. You can just give us comments. We're always so interested in feedback.
Yeah. What are you all hearing from your clients about the programs that are being rolled out? We do have a question. Are there federal grants available or grants as components of the existing programs? I'm not sure, Juan, what you're referring to, for who that is to, what that is. There's lots of things that are going on, so if you can be more specific, that would be great. Grants for small businesses instead of just loans. I can answer that question. Just because we've been doing so much about the PPP and the EIDL. So the federal government doesn't like to say they're giving grants, but it's basically what what a forgivable loan is, and it's also what the advance is on the economic injury loan. So those are the PPP. We did a whole webinar on it. You can go to our website, and I'll ask Melissa if she can pop that link in there again. You might be able to find it if you scroll up in Zoom chat. It's on our webinar page. You can access it from our homepage as well. it is basically 2.5 times the payroll, the monthly payroll. And if it's for payroll protection, so that money has to be spent on payroll expenses. So if you've kept your employees after 8 weeks, then you will, I think it's 60 days, then you will be able to have that loan forgiven. Thank you, Melissa. So
Let me chime in and say that 75% of it
has to be spent on the
payroll.
Yeah, it has to be
Right.
payroll.
And the payroll protection program is a loan and a forgiveness grant. I guess is how you would, a good way to think about it.
Yeah. And then if you apply for an economic injury loan, separate, and you can apply for both. And I've said this once, and I've said it a couple times. A lot of the organizations on this call are also considered small businesses. You can apply for both, but they can't be for the same time period. So if you apply for a PPP and an EIDL now, and if you haven't done it before, like the PPP would be 2 months of protection, and the EIDL, the economic injury disaster loan, would be 4 months of protection, 4 months of expenses and need to keep your organization afloat. I'm guessing that I'm not 100% sure that our SBDCs and women's business centers and other service providers that are getting federal funding, they're going to be eligible, because you're not necessarily going to have an economic injury because of the crisis. You're actually, seems like you're getting more money to do more services. So are there others coming up since PPP is currently spent? Yeah, that's this that's this fourth relief bill that Melissa, that Ann talked about on this slide, this CARES 2 bill. So there's
it's not a new program. It's just more money for PPP.
Yeah, it's more money for PPP.
Yeah.
Is there any one site where all programs, updates, et cetera, are shown to simplify things? That's a good question. I have seen, and I will get you guys a resource. I don't know if there's one place. It's all happening so fast and changing so quickly. So I will, but I think I have seen one, and I will make sure that everybody gets a copy tomorrow in the email that goes out to the attendees. I think we've actually sent some of them out. I mean, the problem with one site where all programs and updates are listed is that it's really unwieldy, because a lot of them, if they're a national site, they've got for all the 50 states, and then whoever sends them in information, and it becomes super unwieldy. Our COVID page does have quite a bit of information on it. I don't know if it has all the programs. But everything we talked about today, though, is in the handout that I'm going to send you.
Right. The ones that we pay attention to, or that we use, is the IRS, clearly, because of all the tax implications of all of it. DOL for all of the employer obligations. They give all the guidance there. SBA and Treasury for the loan information. So really, we pay primary attention to those 4 sites.
Okay, Chris, if you want to unmute yourself, you can go ahead and.
All right. Hey, can you hear me?
I can.
All right. Hey, this is Chris. I'm here in Sacramento with Sac Black Biz and Max Reach. We do specific support for Sacramento Black-owned businesses. Have some feedback with respect to the CARES Act business programs, the PPP and the EIDL, specifically as it relates to Black-owned businesses that we've been talking to here, specifically in the Sacramento area, but also in other parts of California. There have been some significant issues, shall we say, with the structure of and the effectiveness we find of the the PPP and the EIDL programs. I think the first conversation we had about this was a couple of weeks back, and I think the sort of general consensus, or there was at least some feedback to the effect of, grants being preferred over loans, and I understand that, with the EIDL, 10,000 of it is forgivable, and I understand that these are forgivable loans, but they are effectively loans, as at the end of the day, and so from the businesses that we've talked to, they are afraid of loans, okay? And they would rather have grants right now. In this time of uncertainty, they are not confident that they will be able to pay back or even meet any criteria for loan for forgiveness, if that loan forgiveness is based on how well their business is doing in any way, be it through revenue or hiring or other ways. So grants are the preferred way to go, at least from what we're hearing. The EIDL, from what we understand, is run through the SBA, and that makes the loans much more favorable to Black-owned businesses, whereas the PPP is run through the banking system, and the EIDL, which is the favorable of the two, is underfunded in comparison to PPP. I think the EIDL had some maybe $10 billion, if I'm not mistaken.
50.
$50 billion, whereas the PPP had about $349 billion. So the more favorable of the two, with respect to Black-owned businesses, is underfunded. And PPP is less favorable because it goes through the banks, but specifically because what we found last week, or at least through the weekend, was that banks are requiring an existing relationship, existing line of credit, to file for PPP. And as Black-owned businesses and as Black people, we have a long history of very bad relationships with banks, and we have been underbanked and unbanked, business-wise as well as in personal banking, for generations. So to tie such significant business funding, such needed business funding right now to a banking system right now disadvantages Black-owned businesses. That's what we're finding. We're also finding that the criteria varies from bank to bank. So some banks are saying, and we've been on the phones with banks over the past week, some banks are saying we have applications ready, some are saying we don't, some are saying we're doing our own customers first, some are saying call back, some we can't find the application. So there's an inconsistency from bank to bank, and then it would seem that because PPP it does allow for sole props and for self-employed and for individual independent contractors to actually get assistance. That's really good, but it does tie a large majority of that assistance to employees, right? Even in the case of the self-employed and independent contractor status, the amount of the loan is based on, in many ways, a payroll formula, right? Right. So if you have less employees, which 90% of Black-owned businesses have no employees other than the owner. So what that sets us up for is to get less loans, less dollar amounts of the PPP on the PPP loans. Excuse me, so many acronyms, and then also less of those loans. So less of them and less of a dollar amount on them.
Well, so Chris, let me just address some of those things. I totally hear you on the racism in bank lending. I know NCRC has done a couple of studies where they've gone in blind shopping and have found evidence of that. And that's something that our CDFI world is trying to address. All CDFIs by default are not PPP lenders, only the ones that are already 7A and community advantage lenders. I don't, even they are having trouble because they can only lend as much as they have. There's a whole liquidity problem in the banking sector, you know, and having enough capital to actually lend out. That's the whole thing with getting these P loans out. They can only lend out what they have. So definitely hear you on that. And we are looking into possible solutions in trying to get other lenders, like some of our CDFI partners, like Opportunity Fund, you know, CDC, Small Business Finance, and other lenders who have good reputations on lending to minority-owned businesses, including some of the good online lenders. And I'm just gonna, I've said this once, and I'll say it again. People, I just want to do a little bit of call out for responsible small business lending. There's lots of fintechs that have lots of marketing money that are saying that they have these loans. As of today, I believe they might have applied to be a lender, but as of today, none of them have been approved to be a lender. And what they're doing, like what a cabbage is doing is they are collecting application inquiries. So if and when they are approved, they're ready to go. And all fintech players are not alike. I would suggest that everybody go on to the Small Business Borrowers Bill of Rights page and find out who is a signee onto that, because we want to make sure that our small businesses, well, this product, one of my concerns of this product, of opening it up to other lenders, is that with this product, it is definitely defined, and you can't, you know, it only comes with a 1% interest, and it's over 2 months, and then et cetera, et cetera. But this is like a lead generation for some of those unscrupulous predatory players that we want to I want to make sure that people don't know about. But there are a whole bunch of good lenders and that are online, like Funding Circle, Lending Club, and some others that are on. You can find them online. Opportunity Fund happens to be a Cameo member, that have subscribed to transparent and good lending practices. I will pop that website in the chat in a moment.
Heidi, this is
Yeah.
Ann. Can I address this as well?
Yeah.
So first of all, a couple of really good points. The first one was, go ahead.
Go ahead. I was just going to stop sharing my screen.
Okay. Okay. So first of all, there are senators, Democratic senators in the Senate that agree with your observation. Why go through all of this loan business when you could just be, you're basically going to hand out $10,000, you know, anyhow by loan, then grant, right? Why don't you just give grants to businesses that really need them? So your first comment is just want you to know that people in the Senate are actually considering that, pushing that, and we'll see what happens in the next couple of days. That's definitely an idea that has surfaced based on kind of the hassle with the whole loan program. Our other experience is that the banks, the community banks, all those lenders that are part of the 7A program already, those were much better prepared to deal with the loans and processing applications than were the private banks that are non-SBA lenders. And the ones that were already in the SBA system, I have not heard the criticism that they're all over the board. It's really the private banks that are not part of the existing SBA system. They're really all over the board. And as you said, they have different requirements based on what they, based on what they want to do. The guidance from Treasury was not really specific. So they had a lot of, parameters from which to work. One of the things that should help with the liquidity issue is that the Federal Reserve has said they're going to take those loans off the balance sheets of banks that are running up against that problem and just taking them, the Fed will take them. Therefore, opening up a lot more lending than is currently possible. So I think that's a really good solution to some of that.
Can I say a question on that? Are they opening up the loans to be sold on the secondary market? Because that's one of the big sticking points with our members who are lenders, why they're not participating in the PPP program. It's a lot of effort, not a lot of bang for the buck, and just sorry, that's not a good excuse, but not
right. So as I understand it, the secondary lender in this case is the Federal Reserve. You know what I mean? The equivalent of. Yeah. So that's how that's supposed to work, or at least that's how the chairman envisions it. So I think that'll provide a lot of relief.
Yeah, that has been a sticking point. So if the Federal Reserve is going to buy them on the secondary market, that was one of the reasons I've heard from several lenders why they're not participating in making PPP loans, forgivable loans anybody else want to chime in here with a question? Or does anybody, Ann, sorry, do you have anything left to say on what we were just talking about?
No, I just wanted to thank, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting, was it Chris?
Chris,
I just want to thank him for his observations. They're really dead on. And I just encourage you to get those kinds of observations to your representative and your senators. I mean, they're hearing from everybody, so you might as well chime in and let them know what the specific issues are with your community. This is really the time to share those. So thank you so much.
I don't thank you.
Yeah, I can't stress that enough. And I know Ann and Elizabeth and Carolina and I are all always telling you to advocate and write your senators. But really, just, I mean, even an email, even they're getting these messages and they're understanding the pain of what's happening. Okay. There's another question in the chat. Can ITIN holders apply for a PPP? I heard some banks will automatically decline you when you answer no to permanent resident. I think that answer is correct. An ITN holder cannot apply. You have to be a permanent resident. I believe that's one of the requirements. And that is one of the issues that we see and that we're hoping that the state might be able to address. Anne, am I correct in that?
I haven't looked at the application recently, but if you have a criminal record, I think that's a no.
Well, let's detangle those two things. Yeah, because a lot of times people associate the two. Let's not.
Yeah, I'm not associated. I'm just talking about what I remember was like an automatic no when I went through the application, just pretending to be an applicant. And I believe you had to be a permanent resident as well.
Yeah.
And the other one is you can't be a lobbying firm. So
right.
That put us right out of any assistance for sure.
Right. Sorry about that. So yeah, unfortunately, I think that is one of our concerns. I know we've been talking to several of our members who are really concerned about ITIN holders and undocumented. I do know if you are in the Bay Area that Meta and Main Street Launch are working with ITIN holders in COVID response. So those might be two, if you're in the Bay Area, those might be two resources for you to reach out to. That's Mission Economic Development Agency. If you need a contact there or need me to connect you, I'm happy to do so. And then I don't know if anybody knows of anything happening in Southern California for financial help for ITIN holders. I know that that Inclusive Action has a relief fund for street vendors, with a lot of whom are ITIN holders, that kind of thing. But if anybody has any other resources, please feel free to share them into chat, and I can share with the rest of the network as well. That's a really good question, and it is a really big concern of ours, because I know it's a really big concern of many of yours. Are there anybody else want to share some feedback? Has anybody had one of their members get been approved for an EIDL, or their clients get approved for an EIDL or a PPP as of yet? I'd be really interested to hear a success story so we can tout that. Hearing silence in the chat and nobody's unmuting themselves. Yeah. Has anyone on the line successfully submitted an application but just hasn't heard back yet? Give everybody a...
Well, Heidi, I'm going to say that in the a webinar immediately preceding this one with another organization, it seemed like the people on that phone, on that webinar, just started getting the money, like as in while they were on the webinar. I mean, so it seems like it just started being deployed today.
Okay.
Is kind of the experience of that group.
Yeah, and Steve says in chat said we've yet to hear of anyone getting funded, but we've heard from a bunch of people who have successfully applied. Well, that's step one. What did we say the other day? Baby steps, right? In some of this stuff. So does anybody have any other concerns or anything else they'd like to share on the policy angle, that different topic, something else that we can try and answer? If we can't answer, we can try and find the answer for you. I'll stay on the line in case we did. Anna, are you able to stay on the line as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Just in case somebody wants to unmute themselves. If not, I'm going to give it. I know our time is precious, and I want to thank Anne and Elizabeth so much for coming on today and spending an hour with us. But I will sort of end the formal part of this, and feel free to log off unless you have a burning question that you want to ask Anne or Elizabeth. We will stay on. Amy has her hand raised. So Amy, you want to go ahead and unmute yourself?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, if there are nonprofits out there with social enterprises, you may be able to apply for that damage loan. That's what we're, because if an incubator or some way of earning money, you can, you are eligible for that. So I just want to make that clear.
Yeah, and Amy, just tell us who you are and what you do, and just
I'm with El Pajaro Community Development Corporation. I'm the grants and programs manager, and we have 2 incubators. So there's 1 or 2 businesses open out of 16 in our incubator right now. So
wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So great. Well, thank you for that, Amy. That is a good thing, and I know a couple of our members do have some of those types of enterprises. So thank you for that comment. Great. Well, if nobody has any other questions, thank you, Anne and Elizabeth, for coming on and being so informative and hearing what our members have to say. We'll be back next week. As I mentioned, next Monday, we're going to be having a listening session with the TA providers and the state iBank, as well as we hope Isabel Guzman, who's the director, I'm going to get her title wrong. She's the director of the Office of Small Business Advocate for their Go Biz. And we're also holding, I don't think there are too many lenders on the line, but we're also holding a lenders forum this Thursday. And next Thursday, we are holding our webinar and sort of looking a little bit more, preparing for recovery and looking more how your small businesses can create good jobs going forward. So I'm typing my email. If you have any questions about any of our programs, I type my email into the chat box. I wish you all a safe and healthy week. And if you have other topics you want to talk about, you want more information on, please do email me and let me know. We'll try and put something together for you. Thanks, Anne. Thanks, Elizabeth. Have a lovely afternoon, everyone.
Thank you.